The opening day of F1's Bahrain test has already given us the deeper insight we've been waiting for, so here's everything we learned from the first proper day of watching 2026 F1 cars. Mercedes' extraordinary Red Bull claim. Does F1 have a new early benchmark? That's what Mercedes boss Toto Wolff insisted with a surprise declaration fueled by his team's analysis of the initial long-run pace and GPS data. According to Mercedes, strong energy deployment meant Max Verstappen's Red Bull was gaining about 1 second per lap on the straights, consistently. That would be a massive advantage if repeated in races and a huge achievement for Red Bull's brand new in-house engine program. But there remains some skepticism in the paddock about whether there are some politics at play here, at a time when Mercedes' own performance is under the spotlight amid F1's ongoing compression ratio controversy. And talk of any team being clearly ahead is not universal. McLaren chief designer Rob Marshall reckons the reality is that everyone is super close. If Mercedes really is on the back foot against Red Bull though, this was a sobering day for the early pre-season favourite, given it had a first major setback itself. Kimi Antonelli only managed 30 laps right at the end of the day because an issue believed to be on the car side, not the engine, left him on the sidelines for most of the afternoon. What the early data tells us. Well, it was McLaren's world champion Lando Norris who topped the times on Wednesday. Verstappen was a close second and was on a very quick-looking lap that faded in the final corners. And the Red Bull's consistency and speed in Verstappen's hands went unmatched over stints of any meaningful length. Verstappen ran each of the available tyres, the C1 hard, the C2 medium and the C3 soft, in bursts of around 10 laps. He ran a high 1 minute 38 average on mediums early in the day, but averaged just under 1 minute 38 on the hard later on, and was then comfortably in the 1 minute 37's range on softs towards the end of the running. Perhaps most impressive was that all of these runs came with 0 throwaway laps, by which we mean cooldown laps or anomalies from errors. That couldn't be said of Red Bull's rivals. It's still early and the usual caveats about engine modes, fuel loads and energy deployment apply. And Charles Leclerc and Ferrari had a handful of solid 1 minute 38 runs later on, while Mercedes was in the same ballpark once it eventually returned to the track with Antonelli after his problem. But Red Bull certainly made a strong impression. Why Max stands out trackside. When our guys Scott Mitchell-Malm and Ed Straw went trackside, Verstappen stood out for an aggressive downshifting technique linked to the new engine demands. Most notably at turn 10, typically a second gear corner, Verstappen repeatedly downshifted to first while still heavily on the brakes, causing a sharp rise in revs and visible car instability. His approach, usually involving rapid double downshifts in sequence, is aimed at maximising energy recovery under braking to better charge the more powerful 2026 MG UK. Red Bull was the first to deploy the tactic in Bahrain and did so the most consistently and effectively, with Verstappen comfortable in managing the destabilising effects on the car. Audi tried similar methods but looked less settled, while interestingly the Ferrari and Mercedes powered cars largely stuck to conventional techniques. Though unlikely to be a silver bullet, it makes an interesting early differentiator, and a potential clue that Red Bull's targeted tolerance for more aggressive tactics in energy recovery. Ferrari's car seems really difficult. After an encouraging start in the Barcelona test, the Ferrari looks far from the most stable car out there early in Bahrain. That doesn't mean it's bad by any means, but it suggests there's work to do. That impression was supported by Lewis Hamilton. He talked about how complex driving these cars is generally, joking that you need a degree to understand them. He also described the run into the tight turn 10, the left-hander leading onto the middle straight in Bahrain where he had an off today, as the hardest that it's ever been here. Now this is a tricky corner thanks to the curved approach through turn 9 and plenty of drivers had difficulty there, but it seemed particularly difficult for Ferrari. The car certainly appears responsive on turn-in, but all around the track it looked like a handful mid-corner. Ferrari needs to turn that responsiveness into consistency to get the best out of the car. 2026 cars are very different. This was our first chance to see just how different the 2026 spec cars are from their ground effect predecessors. We're sharing daily trackside snapshots with the Race Members Club throughout testing, which you can check out with a free 7-day trial using the link in the description. Here is what a very enthusiastic Scott Mitchell-Malm witnessed on the first day.
The simplest way I can describe it is they look a bit more like proper racing cars. You can see they're a bit smaller, you can see that they're a little bit more responsive on the front end, but they're difficult. They're challenging in a different way. They're catching drivers out more than I thought they would. I was watching at the slow turn 10. That's where you have the fast turn 9 left-hander that then gets tighter and slower and the track falls away into turn 10 itself. It's brilliant because it tests the car's capabilities under braking. You get to see individual car traits, but also that sort of overall car trait performance behaviour. The ground effect here is really tough watching the cars here. They looked slow, they looked They looked cumbersome, they looked heavy, they looked like they were struggling to get around the corner. Here, they're struggling in a different way, being challenged in a different way. Seeing pretty much every car is locked up, even from the favourite Mercedes to expected backmarker Cadillacs, in lots of lockups, front and also rear. Didn't see that really with the ground effect cars. The car moving around as drivers really attack the braking is fascinating. It's really early on, so I'm not reading too much into how good or bad certain cars looked. For example, the Aston Martin came through locked up a lot. It looks quite stiff at the front. It doesn't look particularly easy here, but that doesn't mean anything. In 3 days' time, or even by this afternoon, it could look a lot better. It's just fascinating to get an early glimpse of how these cars are really behaving.
Aston Martin and Honda troubles. Aston Martin only managed 65 laps during the whole Barcelona shakedown test, and its game of catch-up in Bahrain didn't start well, as Lance Stroll managed just 36 laps on Wednesday thanks to a Honda engine problem. Honda described this as a result of a data anomaly that was detected and required further analysis ahead of a return to the track on Thursday. There are still 5 days of testing remaining, but the clock is ticking, and Aston Martin is now well behind in terms of distance covered, with just 431 miles logged compared to the 2,618 of Mercedes. Even Williams, which missed Barcelona entirely, is ahead. Fernando Alonso has already indicated that Aston Martin expects to start the season behind. But based on the first day of running at Bahrain, it's still in the falling even more behind phase, and that doesn't bode well. Audi with a bold new design. Audi was the first team to run this year way back on January the 9th, and appropriately enough it's the first to introduce a big upgrade package, or at least one that's very visually obvious. It includes a change to the front wing, with a small turning vane added to the rear of the front wing end plate lower tunnel, and a tweak to the top flap to make it more loaded inboard. This should help to induce greater outwash. But what really caught the eye was the side pod change. The previous, more letterbox-shaped inlet is replaced by a tall, narrow one as part of a major overhaul of the side pods. That includes the move to a more aggressively downwashed top surface, guiding airflow to the rear of the floor. It's just the first salvo in what's set to be a fierce development war. How the cars really sound. The few videos we were served of the cars from Barcelona offered a bit of a clue that the new engines sound quite different to before. Let's go back to Scott to find out what he heard trackside.
Watching F1 cars up close means hearing them up close, and the sound is usually quite different to what you hear on television, so it was interesting to hear the different engines for the first time properly in person. And they have distinctive sounds. I wouldn't go so far as to say they sound drastically different from previous generation of engine, but the absence of the MG UK does make them sound less muffled. They are a bit more aggressive in some ways, and they all do sound a little bit different. I would say that the Red Bull and the Audi sound maybe the meanest. The Audi sounds a bit unrefined. The Honda didn't come past me enough to get a pretty good read on it, but I think that engine sounds a little bit louder than, say, the Mercedes and the Ferrari engines, which are a bit more kind of quiet and conventional, I would say. They sound the closest, in my opinion, to what came before, but definitely interesting to hear them for the first time and get a sense for engines that are a little bit more punchy, shall we say, on the eardrums, even if it's not a return to screaming V10s or V8s.
Williams is overweight, but it works. After deflecting rampant speculation over the winter about its car being overweight, Williams has admitted that it will need to get its FW48 on a bit of a diet over the first few races. While claims about it missing the target by 20 to 30 kilograms appear to have been on the extreme side, team boss James Vowles admitted that its official claim of being 772.4 kilograms, that's just 4.4 kg over the minimum weight, was just a press pack figure. Although Vowles falls short of revealing what the car weight actually is, he has said that efforts were made after the start of the season to shed some excess. The early good news for Williams, though, is that having missed the first test, it has at least started to rack up the miles. And that decent foundation means it can at least avoid being unprepared if there is performance being left on the table with the car itself.